Today you're going to learn how to play a kick drum properly, with maximum volume and minimum effort. This is the heel up whip. This video is divided into 4 parts: the drop and stop, generating momentum, common errors, and practice. This is actually the second part of the full technique, but by far the most important. I prefer to teach this first as it's directly responsible for producing the note. Once you've got this, adding the first part is a pretty simple step. So what is the drop and stop? With your foot on the pedal, you're going to plan to flex your foot. This essentially means push up onto the ball of your foot using the same muscles you would to push up onto tiptoes. The weight of your leg will be going through the ball of your foot, causing the beater to be buried into the drum skin. For the drop and stop, this is your starting position. Next, you're going to release the tension, causing your heel to drop, but before it hits the plate, you're going to stop it in the air, about 1 centimetre above. Here's what's happening. Once you release the tension, the weight of your leg exerts downward force through your heel. During this brief time, the ball of your foot will become weightless, causing the beater to come back from the drum skin. When you stop your heel in midair, just before it hits the plate, this downward force is transferred back into the ball of your foot, causing the beater to strike the drum. Don't rush this, take your time getting the reps in. The mechanics of this are somewhat nuanced compared to the common stamping you may already be familiar with. This isn't a particularly natural movement. Eventually, you'll start to get a good solid note with nothing more than good mechanics and the weight of your leg. Once you can do this consistently, it's time to add the first part of the technique. We've actually been doing this already to get into the starting position for the drop and stop, but now we're going to smooth things out. Start with your heel in the air, about 1 centimetre above the plate. This is the stop point of the drop and stop. Plan to flex your foot to raise your heel, and once you're at the top, execute the drop and stop without delay. If done correctly, you will have added a nice bit of momentum into your technique. Your foot will start to act like a whip, producing a very loud note with very little effort. Before applying this technique in the upcoming exercises, I want you to make sure you've got everything working correctly. There's only a couple of errors that I see regularly with my students, and thankfully they're fairly easy to both spot and fix. The first, using your hip flexors. The biggest mistake I see by far is people lifting their leg to generate momentum. This can happen at the beginning of the motion or as an additional movement when your heel gets to the top. Visually, this is usually accompanied by leaning backwards, which is an attempt to maintain balance using your core. If I see this happening, I know the leg is being lifted from the hip flexors rather than being pushed up using the plantar flexion of the foot. Let's be clear. You want to use the slow twitch muscle fibers in your calves, which are perfectly designed for endurance, rather than the fast twitch muscle fibers in your hip flexors, which are much better designed for strength and power. In a live gig, you'll be playing your kick drum thousands of times. Endurance is your friend. Luckily, we have an easy fix for this. You're going to monitor the offending muscle, your hip flexor. Find the middle point of your knee with your finger and track it up to your hip line. Lift your leg and you should feel that muscle flex. We want to make sure this doesn't happen at any point during the technique. It may do in the beginning, but once you're aware of it, begin to adjust your technique until the top part of your leg is able to stay relaxed throughout the motion. Common error number 2, leading with your toes. Whether your foot is moving up or down, your heel will be leading the dance. As it moves up, your toes will follow. As it moves down, your toes will follow. Think of it as your heel generating the motion that causes your toes to whip into the pedal. Some of my students have found it useful to imagine pressing a button with their heel that exists at the stop point just above the plate. Obviously, in reality, the ball of your foot plays the note. However, thinking of this imaginary button does seem to help. Finally, poor range of motion. The more you're able to plan to flex your foot, the higher your heel will rise and the more momentum you will generate. Over time, however, you will need less height to produce the same quality of sound. To begin with, I want you to focus on this full range of motion. As you get more proficient with the technique, you will exert less effort and generate less movement without sacrificing any of this quality. But allow this development to happen naturally. So what about the other foot? Obviously, this isn't essential or even that relevant for developing your kick drum technique. However, you'll be using the very same technique on your hi-hat pedal and of course on a double kick pedal if you ever go down that route, which I suggest you do. It makes sense to get this process started now. Thankfully, one foot should already have this down, so you have a teacher in one foot for the student in the other. Once you've got both feet whipping those pedals like champions, let's put this technique into practice. Start your click track at 58 BPM and walk on the quarter note pulse. Right, left, left. Once you're happy that both feet are performing this technique correctly and in time, we're going to add some distractions. First up, add your right hand on the snare drum, lining it up with each quarter note. Aim to play hand and foot in unison, avoiding any flamming. This is when two notes are struck together, but not quite at the same time. Next, add your left hand on the offbeat eighths in between the quarter notes. You're now performing a single stroke roll over walking feet. Pay close attention to your feet, maintaining the correct technique while your hands continue on top. I'd usually aim for about 16 bars or a minute of correct execution before increasing the speed. I personally like to increase the click track in 10% increments because I'm anal, but any increase between 5 and 10 BPM is a good number to aim for. Now we're going to incorporate this technique into our fan favourite, the money beat. Let's start with our kick drum playing the quarter note pulse. We're going to close our hi-hat by raising our heel and play eighth notes on it with our hand. So for every one kick, we have two equally spaced hi-hats. Now add a snare on the 2 and 4, and boom, money beat. Again, your focus should be on your kick. Are you executing the technique without any of the common errors? If you're happy everything is working smoothly, start to increase the tempo and get those reps in. That's your lesson on the heel up whip. Enjoy your practice.